have to do is go to python.org, then hover over the Downloads tab, and click on the appropriate version. At the moment, we're on Python 3.7, but this may increase later on. All content in this course works with all Python versions from 3.5 onwards, so don't worry too much about which Python version you're installing. If you're using Mac OS, just click on the installer and follow it as you would for any other program. If you're on Windows though, you may need to change some settings, so let's look at that now. On Windows, the process is the same. Go to python.org, hover over Downloads, and download it for Windows. Do make sure that you are using Windows Vista or after, as Python 3.5 Plus cannot be used on XP. Once you've opened the Python installer on Windows, you gotta make sure that Add Python 3.7 to Path, this checkbox down here, is checked. You do need that for everything to work well, as that allows other programs to use Python, and because we're going to be using PyCharm, that's going to come in really handy. Once that's checked, you can just go ahead and click on Install Now, and that's going to go through and install Python in your computer. If you're on Windows 10, once the installation completes, you will be able to disable the path length limit. What this means is that in some cases, you may have a file path that is longer than the limit for Windows, but you can allow Python to bypass it, which gives you more flexibility for really no drawbacks. If you're using Windows 8 or earlier, that option won't be there, but that's okay. Don't worry too much about it. Once that's done, you can close and you can launch IDLE. So do make sure you open the Python 3.7 version or whichever other version of Python you want to open. Alright, that's everything for this video. Thank you for joining me. We've learned how to install Python as a Python editor. It's a program that lets us write our Python code and run it and add other files to a project and, do a bunch of stuff. But it's just an editor. It just lets us write the code and gives us a few more pieces of functionality. You don't have to use PyCharm if you don't want. You can use any text editor, such as Notepad on Windows or Notepad++ if you have installed that. You can use Atom or Visual Studio Code. You can use Sublime Text. You can use TextMate. There's a lot of editors you can use out there if for some reason you don't want to use PyCharm. However, I'm assuming you are a beginner in Python, and if so, I really recommend that you go for PyCharm. It is the best editor for starting up with. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck, it does a lot of stuff for you, and it's really helpful. So I definitely recommend that. And also, as you get better at Python, you'll discover that PyCharm does more and more things that you didn't know about before that will keep making your life easy. I use PyCharm at work, and I recommend it for you too. Anyway, that's enough of the sales pitch. Don't worry, this thing is free, so you don't have to pay anything. Go over to www.jetbrains.com, and then let's go over to Tools and find PyCharm here. And notice how JetBrains has a bunch of other IDEs for different programming languages. You don't want to install any of them other than PyCharm, unless, of course, you are doing some work in other languages as well. So let's go into the PyCharm page. And then you'll be greeted with two options. First of all, press download now here, and now you're greeted with two options: professional or community. Now, select the operating system that you want. If you're using Windows, then go for Windows, and otherwise select your other operating systems there. And then make sure you go for Community Edition. Okay, this is free. Completely free software, as in you don't have to pay anything for it. If you use the Professional Edition, that's a free trial. So after a month, I think, you'll be asked to pay. So go and download the Community Edition. That's the version we're using in this course. Of course, if you're working for a company and they pay, I recommend you use the Professional Edition. It does give you a few more things, particularly as you go into web development, which is a key use case for Python. And we'll look at that later on in the course. But for now, download the Community Edition, install it like any good old normal program, and then you'll be able to launch it. Now, in the next video, we'll launch PyCharm, and we're going to look at joining PyCharm less like this. If you get asked to import any settings from a previous PyCharm version, just say no, because you don't have any previous PyCharm versions. Unless, of course, you do have a previous PyCharm version that you want to import settings from. But if you don't know what it means, just say no or cancel or exit. Then make sure you open up PyCharm and you'll have a window that looks more or less like this, or possibly like one we'll see in just a moment. Nonetheless, what we want to do is go into create new project. So let's create a new project, and then you've got two things that you have to pick. The location of your project, where in your computer this project is going to live, and also the interpreter. This is the Python version that you want to use for this project. Notice that, for example, Mac OS comes with Python 2.7 already installed. However, when you create a new Python project, you can choose whether you want to use Python 2.7 or Python 3.6 that we've just installed. Python works fine if you have multiple versions all installed at the same time in your computer, and it is on a per project basis that you'll choose which Python version to use. So you can install Python 3.7 when it comes out, alongside 3.6, and that's totally fine. Let's pick out a location for our project. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to go over to my desktop. Okay. So I'll open up the desktop here, and I'm going to create a new folder, which is going to be called milestone 1. Now, my project is going to be in this folder here. So any new files I create are going to appear inside that folder, and basically all the contents of the core of this project are going to be inside that folder. Make sure to pick out a folder that you like. For the interpreter, I have a lot of options here, and you won't have so many options. But what you want to go and find is 3.6, presumably 0.4, which is the one we've just downloaded, or 3.7, or 3.5, or whatever version you've got installed at the time of this video. Now, the latest version currently is 3.6.4, but I've got 3.6.0 installed, and that's fine for the purposes of this course. So make sure you find 3.6. Make sure you don't select an invalid one. If you have any, select only the valid ones. And we'll look at why I have so many versions later on. Then you can go and press create. And really that's it. So a couple of things. PyCharm shows you a tip of the day. These things are pretty useful, and it tells you some information on how to use PyCharm. I recommend that you don't untick the box, so that every time you open PyCharm, you get this, and maybe you can learn a thing or two. So I normally do read them. I won't read them today. Then what we've got is our project here on the left. If this was the first screen you saw when you opened up PyCharm, you can always go over to create a new project by pressing on File, New Project. And that will let you create a brand new project. Okay. Then you've got a bunch more menu options, and we're going to be learning a lot about those as we go through the course. So don't worry if you don't know what they do just yet. You've got the usual edits, undo, redo, cut and copy, and so forth. And they can be pretty handy in a lot of scenarios. Then what we've got is our tree. Here we've got our project files, problems, and scratches. That's a really bad name. We'll only be working with project in this course. This gives you the project files and also any external libraries that we're using. At the moment, this project is only using one external library, which is Python 3.6. That's the interpreter we chose earlier on. And our project is a folder called milestone 1 that doesn't have anything inside it. But we can add things to it. For example, you can right-click on it and add a new Python file. Then you'll get this dialog, and you can choose what type of file you're going to add, Python file or Python unit test. Don't click on that just yet. We'll look at that later on. Just click on Python file, and I'm going to call it app. App now is created inside our project. Look, we've got our file app.py, and the .py has been appended at the end, and that just means that this is a Python file. The name app.py can be anything you'd like, but app.py is a pretty popular name for your sort of main file in a Python program. Whenever you run your program, likely this is the file that you're going to be running. So app.py is a pretty popular name, and I advise that you go for that for the main, most important file in your program. Now, over the next few videos, we're going to be looking at developing our milestone project. But first, of course, I'm going to give you the brief so that you can tackle this milestone project on your own. It's going to be a challenge, and you may have to do some research in order to do so. But please don't just move over to the next lecture. Give it a go. Try developing this application on your own first, and doing that is going to ensure that you learn much faster